July 24. It's almost 3 a.m. and I have depression. How can I top the previous video I did? How can I make the Razor ad, but without making the Razor ad? Because I'm already making the Razor ad, except it's the keyboard this time.
Subscribe and turn on notifications because I'm releasing that pretty soon.
Marvel is releasing trailer after trailer, and here I am, doing nothing. No upload for a month. But I noticed something. Marvel released the trailer for She-Hulk, and they ran out of budget to make the last scene with Daredevil. Marvel running out of budget, I thought? No worries. I can help them out. So I did. Context for you lot. So Marvel released the She-Hulk trailer, and in the end of the trailer they teased Daredevil and they never actually showed his face. They just cut him off. So I decided to take up on the challenge of actually showing him. And disclaimer, this tutorial is not for beginners. This is a fun video, at the same time informative. So if you know Blender already and After Effects, this will help you. Otherwise, this will not help you very much. So you have to go watch beginner tutorials first, please. Thank you. Let's get started. Open up Blender, delete everything inside. Don't do this! And then add a reference image.
I do.
Add a cube. And then what I like to do is add a level 1 subdivision and apply it. After that, I select these two front faces and then stretch them down until I get a nice looking jawline. Once that's done, I grab the vertices on the side to make it a bit more flat. Squeeze the thing on the side so it becomes a bit thinner. Apply another subdivision and then you can add as many subsamples as you want. After that, orient it best you can to the right angle and then start shaping it up to the head's shape. Take your time and add more subsections to the thing to add more detail, but don't add too much yet. Once you have the basic shape, you can start selecting the base of the horns. Make sure to deselect anything on the other side. And then extrude it out and make it thin just to make it a horn. Just do the best you can to make the horn shape and that should be enough. After that, you can make the other side and use it to symmetrize both of them. Now we're gonna remesh, so make sure you have no hole in your mesh so you can use the stuff like grid fill and then fill up any of the holes. Remesh to something small, but I went for 0.01, which was too low.
That's pretty average. I don't know what those.
So you can go for something higher. Right after this, now you can do the sculpting. Just smooth everything out until it looks like a basic nice shape. After you're done smoothing, you can use the elastic deform to shape it up a bit more and then make it more accurate. Don't add any details yet, we're gonna move on to that next. By this stage, I realized I need a camera to project the image, so I move the mesh again to place it properly. Get it as close as possible, and then after that, add a modifier called UV project. After that, in the shader editor, add the image that you used as a reference to project the image onto the mesh. Use the mapping to move around the image as close as you can to align with the reference. You can play with the visibility of the mesh to see back and forth of if it's aligned properly or not. Again, get it as close as possible so you can start sculpting on the mesh. Now that you have a texture mapped, you can start sculpting on the thing and then you know where to go. Still yet, do not go too detailed. Using masks, you can select around any hard edge areas and then I use that to make a small dent in the side of the head just so we can get some shadows. It doesn't need to be detailed, just enough that we can get lighting. Now instead of using a reference image, because we need to get another angle, let's get another camera and then add a background image. Scale up the image just so you can get the head in the center of the frame and then start aligning the camera to the mesh. My technique on doing this is aligning one point of the image to the actual head and then use the 3D cursor and rotate the camera and scale it around instead. Go back to the modifiers and change the UV project to the second camera and then you can add your second image. Where's the music on? Oh, I ran out of music, so let's just look for some more.
Access granted.
Same thing as the first shader, make another shader and then add the second image as the image projection. And then scale and align it so it's lined up with the reference behind. Get it as close as possible and then we can use this as a projection. Now you can start sculpting the nose because we have a second angle. Does not need to be detailed, just enough so we can get shadows and lighting. In the object data properties, go to open up UV maps and then make another UV. The first one we're going to call projection, the second one we're going to call UV map. The first one is going to be used by the modifier that we made it before, and UV map is going to be something detailed that you want to use in the final. In my case, I just use Smart UV because I'm lazy, which I regret later. It looks bad, but it's fine. Replace your principal shader with an emission shader and then add it to the surface. Create a new image texture, and then instead of pressing open, click new and then make a new image and then rename it to whatever you want. Add at least 2K and then you should be good to go. I went with 4K, which is 4096. After you have the UV map projected, now we're going to be baking. Make sure your render engine is in cycles, then go down to color management, change the view transform from lit filmic to standard. Go back to the modifiers and then make sure in the UV map you have the projection selected. In the bake type, change it to emit and then bake. It will take a few seconds, and then after that you will get a nice textured image on your UV map of the baked image. Make sure you save this image and then rename it to something appropriate. Do the same thing for the second shader. Add an image, bake it, and then save it. And do the same thing again, and then just make sure you name them separately. If you want the second side of the face, you can use another image that has the other side and then project it. Or, which I will show later, you can actually mirror them as well. More baking, and then after that, when you're done saving, open up Photoshop. Drag all the images in and then save the Photoshop file as a PSD and then open that up inside of Blender. Make sure in the UV maps you're using UV map, not projection. Inside Photoshop now you can get to work, start cleaning up any of the UV maps and then use the other image projections to actually get a clearer result. But if you're using a single angle like I am, you don't actually need to use multiple images. I just wasted my time. Open up a new Blender file and use the file append and then add the object inside so you can have a clean new system with just your head textured. Now I'm gonna open up After Effects and add the clip that I want to edit. I went straight to the area where I want to do the VFX, went to the first clip where there is a clean plate and then made it a pre-composition. Cut it and then make it a pre-composition. I narrowed it down to the first frame and then added to render queue. After you add it to render queue, make it a JPEG and render it out. That way you get one clean plate of the footage that you can now Photoshop. Open it up in Photoshop and then you can use the spot healing tool to actually clean up everything. It's a beautiful tool. Try to select the entire character in one go so that Photoshop does not use parts of him to replace him. Now we have a clean plate and then save it up as a PSD file, import that into After Effects. Drag and drop it on top of your footage and then use the mode difference to actually see what the difference is. When it's black, that means there is no difference. When it's colored, that means there is something there. Different. Add a keyframe to your position, move along the timeline and then move the picture to make it completely black. That means there is no difference between it and the background. Move the image as much as you can with the reference footage that we have, and then after that I like to do what is called projectile. Basically what that means is you have a base animation of where the picture is moving, and then after that you can just project where it should go next. Duplicate the footage and then use the rotor brush tool to cut out the character only. Get as much as you can and then after that cut the footage afterwards. If your image is moving consistently and it looks natural, then you've done a good job. Now you have a reference footage of the background and the character. Render this out as an MP4 and then import it inside the camera inside of the new file that we just made in Blender. Now, you can add the cube and start modeling it to make the shape of the body, or just give up and then download a 3D model online. Import the FBX and then realize that you've actually downloaded Ant-Man instead of a normal body. Scale it up until it's the right shape and then take your time and place the character's body as close as possible. You can also deform the body and then use soft select as well as 3D cursor to deform the body into the right position. Again, get it as close as possible and as tight as possible so you don't get as much overhang. Now you can reposition the head inside of the body we just created and then use sculpting to shrink the entire head of the body inside of the head. That way we get a nice seam around the neck. You can select and deform the shape again to make the head aim the way you want. After this, you can project the image like we have before and then use sculpting to actually move around the image to make sure it's not going outside of the body from a reference image. If it's black, we're actually seeing the sky, that's the reason. Now I can go into more detail and start aligning the images more properly. Here what I've done is I'm going to duplicate the image, add a new texture and then flip the image so I can get the left side of the body as well. Now that we're projecting directly, we can just move the camera from elsewhere and we can see how the projection is going. I also used the pen and made the placement on surface so I can draw on details and then align it on the other side. Now I've got the base texture of the body and now I need to make the shoulders, which are completely black and missing, so I need to find another image which actually shows the shoulders. Luckily, I already have one. Add a new camera, place the image inside with the shoulders and then align the camera to properly align with the body. Based on what you want to texture, make sure you align that area the most. For me, it was the shoulder and the stomach, so the hands are not necessary. For projection, I would suggest doing manual UVs instead of smart UV, but for the head, I have already done it and it's too late, but for the body, I'm making the seams right now so I can make the UV properly. I'm making all my seams on the back of the body because we're never gonna see it, and I'm also making seams on my mesh so that I don't get any hot spots on my UV like these. After you're done, you can bake and save all these images, import them into Photoshop, and then using masks and leveling, you can make the images align perfectly. Take your time doing this and go back and forth between the program, Photoshop and Blender to make it look correctly. Now I'm just spending my time doing some lighting because I want to match the green light that's around the face. To get a nice thread material, I used the brick texture and then mapping, and I made it very small to make it just look like there's threads going across. Here's a very quick time lapse as well of me animating the camera. You don't need to be accurate, just close enough that you can fool the audience. In the first few frames, it's critical that your camera movement is as close as possible to the reference footage so that you can align the rest and you don't have to have any of these jumping issues. Import your footage inside of After Effects and then color grade it to correctly and move it side by side and then get it as close as possible to the reference footage. You can mess around with stuff like lighting, UV, and the placement of the camera as well as other stuff to make sure that it aligns perfectly with your footage. And it looks perfect. Now because the camera is going to continue moving beyond what we actually have, I'm going to extend my scene and then duplicate the background or use other references to actually extend the background. After you're done with the movement, I also duplicated the files and using a mask, I separated the ground and then I use a mesh wrap to actually make it look like it's parallaxing. Halfway through the render, I found news that the Daredevil is supposed to be yellow and red, so I moved into my UV of the head, and then using a hue saturation and curves layer, I made it yellow, put them into a group, and then using a mask, I masked around where I wanted to be yellow. I open a Blender to make sure what UV I'm drawing on is the correct one. Then when you save the image, Blender should automatically update and you can just start rendering. Then once that's done, I added the final touch of adding the Daredevil music, add some reverb, and then it's good to go. And then here is the final result. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. This tired the shit out of me. I really hope you did enjoy it so I can keep making more and it's fun for me as well. Thank you.